You already know what would happen if time reversed. Entropy would increase backward. Everything would unhappen and then it would snap forward again. Except that's not what would happen, not remotely. And the reason it's not what would happen is the reason you feel a specific kind of vertigo when you try to imagine the moment the reversal stops, which is something physicists apparently feel too, though they have equations for it, and you just have that vertigo feeling. And 1 second of backward time traveling through your body would be 1 second of your atoms moving in perfect reverse. Your last breath becoming your first breath, your heartbeat unbeating, your neurons firing backward through every thought you just had. Except your neurons are not reversible. Nothing biological is. Which means backward time doesn't just undo the universe. It unmakes the laws that govern what can be unmade. I came across this while reading about p-symmetry violation late one night, which had absolutely nothing to do with the question I was supposed to be answering. I was working on something about particle decay, how certain particles prefer to decay one direction in time rather than another. And somewhere around 3 in the morning, I made a connection that probably seems obvious to anyone who studies this regularly. I realized that if time truly reversed, the preference wouldn't reverse. The particle would keep decaying the same direction. And then I was 3 hours deeper into a different problem entirely. My original research still open in another tab. What stopped me was a question that seemed almost too simple to be the thing that had troubled physicists for nearly a century. If time moves backward, does a broken cup unbreak? The answer is no, and the reason it's no is not because God hates broken cups. It's because of something called the arrow of time. And that arrow doesn't point backward just because you reverse the clock. That question sat in my head for weeks. I'd be washing dishes and it would surface. I'd be walking and suddenly I'd realize I still didn't have an answer that felt complete. I'm still not entirely sure I do, but I've gotten close enough that the question has transformed into something harder, which is probably what happens when you follow any real problem far enough in. Here's the structure of what I've learned, and I want to be precise about this because the structure matters more than the details. First, there's what everyone intuitively believes about time reversal. It's symmetrical, reversible, a kind of cosmic film reel you can run backward. That's not wrong exactly, it's just incomplete in a very specific direction. Second, what the research actually shows is something that contains that intuitive picture but leaves most of it behind. The symmetry is there, but it's not the kind of symmetry that applies to actual events. It's mathematical symmetry, which operates in a completely different register. Third, and this is the part almost nobody discusses, there's a reason we can't actually reverse time, and it has almost nothing to do with physics. It has to do with information, with entropy, with the fundamental directionality built into how the universe stores what has happened. That third part is where this actually goes. The first two are just the entrance. Let me start with what seems like the obvious thing. Time is asymmetrical. You age forward, entropy increases forward, causes precede effects. We call this asymmetry the arrow of time. And it seems so fundamental, so woven into the structure of reality, that the question, what if time reversed, seems to violate something basic about existence itself. But here's where it gets strange. Not for researchers who have lived with this for years, but for you specifically because of what you already know from 5 minutes ago. The equations don't care about direction. The fundamental equations of physics, Newton's laws, Einstein's relativity, quantum mechanics, they work exactly the same in both directions. Reverse time, reverse position, and the math still holds. A particle moving forward in time with forward momentum behaves identically to a particle moving backward in time with backward momentum. The equations are what physicists call time reversible, symmetrical, beautiful in a mathematical sense. But reality isn't. This is where I need to correct something I just said, because the way I phrased it isn't quite right, and the correction matters more than the original statement. The equations are reversible, but that's not the same as saying time is symmetrical in nature. What I should have said is that the fundamental equations are indifferent to which direction you call forward. The universe doesn't have a preference written into the math. The preference emerges from initial conditions. It emerges from entropy, and that's a completely different claim because it means time's arrow is not a law. It's a consequence of the fact that the universe started in a very specific state, a state of extremely low entropy. And entropy has been increasing ever since. That increase, that one-way flow from low entropy to high entropy, that is the arrow. That is what makes time feel like it has a direction at all. So imagine a single second of time flowing backward. Not the entire universe reversing, just 1 second, just one moment. What would have to happen? Every particle would have to reverse its momentum. Every wave would have to unpropagate. Every chemical bond would have to unform, then reform in the previous second. Every photon would have to travel backward along the exact path it came from. And because you are made of particles and photons and chemical bonds, you would experience this reversal too. Your atoms would be moving backward. Your neurons would be firing backward through the thoughts you just had. Your heart would be unbeating. The oxygen in your lungs would be unbinding from your hemoglobin. The electrical impulses in your brain would be traveling backward through whatever you just thought about, unexperiencing your experience in perfect reverse. This is the part where the question becomes strange in a way that's almost physical. Try to imagine it. Really try to imagine your last thought unhappening in your brain. Try to imagine your consciousness unexperiencing the last second of your life. What does that even mean? Does consciousness go backward? Does a memory that just formed unform? Does the pattern of electrical activity that constitutes you being aware reverse course and undo itself? And if it does, if you genuinely become unaware during that second, then how would you know it happened at all? How would you know that time had reversed and then reversed back? The answer is you wouldn't, you couldn't. And this is where the problem becomes something other than a physics problem. Here's what a physicist named Ludwig Boltzmann realized in the 1800s, and it has shaped every conversation about time since. He showed that entropy, the measure of how many ways a system can be arranged while looking the same from the outside, entropy always increases. A cup breaks into 1,000 pieces, and there are 1,000 ways to arrange those pieces that look like broken. There is one way to arrange them. That looks like whole. The asymmetry between the number of broken states and whole states explains why cups break and don't unbreak. It explains why time feels directional. It's not that the universe forbids broken cups from unbreaking. It's that the probability of all those pieces spontaneously arranging back into a cup by pure chance is so vanishingly small that it will never happen, ever. Not in the age of the universe, not in any meaningful sense. Boltzmann's insight was that the arrow of time is not a law, it's statistics, it's probability. And if you could actually reverse every particle in the universe, if you could genuinely run time backward, you'd have to reverse the probabilities too. You'd have to reverse entropy. You'd have to make the universe go from a state of high disorder to low disorder, from many possible arrangements to one specific arrangement, which is exactly the opposite of how the universe actually behaves. And this is where I want to address something you might be thinking, because it's a legitimate objection and it's important. You might be thinking that this only applies to large-scale systems, that at the quantum level, reversibility might work differently. You'd be right to think that quantum mechanics is reversible in its equations. Schrödinger's equation goes both directions, but it doesn't rescue the original problem in the way you might hope, because quantum systems don't exist in isolation. The moment a quantum system interacts with anything else, the moment it exchanges a photon, becomes entangled, decoheres in any way, that interaction is irreversible. Information spreads into the environment. It becomes part of the background noise of the universe. And once information spreads like that, you can't gather it back up. You can't make the system uninteract. The reversibility of quantum mechanics is theoretical. The irreversibility of real interactions is practical. And practice in the universe is what matters. Now, let me zoom out for a moment and ask why this question even exists as a question at all. What configuration of knowledge had to be in place for this gap to become visible? It took Newton to show that time was something that could be reversed in equations. It took thermodynamics to show that reality didn't care what the equations said. It took quantum mechanics to show that reversibility and irreversibility could both be true in different contexts. And it took information theory to show that the irreversibility wasn't about physics at all, it was about information. Only when all of those pieces were in place could someone ask, if time reversed, what would actually happen? The question exists because we now know that mathematics is not destiny. The universe doesn't have to follow what the equations suggest. Then zoom back in. So what would actually happen if time reversed for 1 second? Nothing. That's the answer. And it's not satisfying, and it shouldn't be. It's not satisfying because it feels like a dodge. It feels like I'm saying the answer is we can't know, or it's undefined, or some other philosophical get out of jail card. But that's not what I mean. I mean nothing, literally. If time reversed for 1 second, nothing would happen because a single second of reverse time would be causally disconnected from the second before it and the second after it. Let me explain why. For a second to reverse, the boundary conditions would have to match. The state of every particle at the start of the reversed second would have to be the exact reverse of the state at the end of the previous second. But the universe doesn't maintain that kind of precision. Entropy is always increasing. States are always diverging. The reverse second would come into existence and then immediately decohere. The particles would continue following the forward arrow of time because that's the only direction that's statistically probable. And statistical probability is all the universe actually runs on. The reversed second would be like trying to push a boulder uphill. The universe would push it back down immediately, completely, as if it never happened. Except here's where the strangeness deepens. You are not made of abstract physics. You're made of neurons, and neurons are biological systems with information density. A single second of your brain reversing would be a single second of your neural state unconfiguring. But your brain is embedded in a body. Your body is embedded in an environment. That environment has seen you for the previous second. Light has bounced off your face and traveled away. Sound waves have propagated from your mouth. Chemical signals have been exchanged. Information about you has entered the world. And when your brain reverses, that information doesn't reverse. It keeps traveling outward, dispersing into entropy, becoming part of the noise of the universe. This is where the question you had at the beginning transforms into something harder. If time reversed for 1 second and your brain reversed with it, but the world around you kept moving forward, what would you experience? More specifically, what would you remember experiencing? Because memory is stored in neural patterns. A reversed brain would have reversed neural patterns. The moment the reversal ended and time flowed forward again, your brain would immediately start re-encoding the forward-flowing present into those reversed patterns. You'd wake up essentially into a world that was 1 second ahead of where you expected it to be, with no memory of the reversal, because the reversal would have unencoded the memory that would have made the reversal knowable. This is a little like, and the analogy falls apart here, which is actually the point, like trying to describe the texture of silence to someone who has only ever experienced it as the absence of something they wanted to hear. The reversal isn't the absence of forward time. It's something else entirely. It's a state that physics allows but probability forbids. It's something that would be like trying to unexperience an experience after you've already experienced it, which is not even wrong in the way a false statement is wrong. It's wrong in the way a grammatical error is wrong. It violates the basic syntax of what experience is. You are probably expecting this to start wrapping up. I thought so too. at about this point in the research, I thought I was approaching the conclusion that I'd lay out the problem and the answer would follow and we'd be done. But the closer I got to the actual answer, the more it became clear that I hadn't understood the actual question. The question isn't what happens if time reverses. The question is why we can imagine time reversing when the universe couldn't actually do it. Why is our mind so capable of holding this impossible scenario? Why does it feel possible even though every physical principle says it's not? The answer is that time reversal isn't actually about time, it's about information. And information has a property that time doesn't have. Information can exist in your head without existing anywhere else. You can imagine a scenario. You can reverse it mentally. You can hold both the forward and backward versions in your mind simultaneously. But the universe can't do that. The universe can't unknow something it knows. It can't delete information that's already been encoded into its structure. There is a thought experiment called the demon of Maxwell. Maxwell's demon is an imaginary tiny creature that sits between two chambers of gas. If the demon could see individual molecules and open a door selectively, letting fast molecules into one chamber and slow ones into the other, it could decrease entropy. It could reverse the arrow of time locally. It could make a broken cup unbreak. But here's the crucial part. The demon would have to remember what it did. The demon would have to store information about which molecules it let through. And storing that information costs entropy. It costs more entropy to store the information than the demon would gain by sorting the molecules. So the process is always a net loss. Entropy still increases. The arrow still points forward. You are like Maxwell's demon. You can imagine time reversing. You can hold the information in your head. But the moment you do that, the moment you encode that imaginary reversal into the neural patterns of your brain, you're creating entropy. You're ordering your neurons in a particular way. The universe has to pay that cost. And it always pays it, which means even your ability to imagine time reversal is itself part of what makes time irreversible. This is where something really strange happens. And I want to be precise about it because the strangeness is real. The universe is not just constrained by the laws of thermodynamics. It's constrained by the laws of information. And those laws say that you cannot reverse an event unless you have access to all the information that event encoded into the universe. A broken cup encodes information, the exact positions, velocities, and histories of every molecule that shattered. That information has dispersed. It's now part of the microscopic thermal fluctuations of the environment. It's in the sound waves that propagated from the breaking. It's in the dust particles disturbed by the fall. To unbreak the cup, the universe would have to gather all of that information back, undisperse it, and reverse it spontaneously, by chance. The probability of that happening is not small. It's not even vanishingly small. It's zero, mathematically zero. Not so small we can ignore it. Actually, literally zero. This has been proven rigorously. There is a configuration of the universe in which a broken cup unbreaks. It exists mathematically, but the number of configurations in which it stays broken is so vastly, incomprehensibly larger that the probability of the universe randomly selecting the unbreaking configuration is less than 1 in 10 to the power of A. Numbers so large that writing it out would require more atoms than exist in the observable universe. And if you try to reverse time for 1 second, the same mathematics applies. The universe would have to spontaneously decrease entropy in every system you're reversing. It would have to gather all the dispersed information. All the photons that bounced off your face in that second, all the sound waves that left your mouth, all the heat that radiated from your skin, all of it would have to be sucked back in, re-encoded into your brain, and your neural patterns would have to spontaneously unform into the configuration they had 1 second earlier. The probability is 0, actual 0, not metaphorically, not practically, mathematically, genuinely, actually 0. But here's the part that physicists argue about, and here's the part that has never been resolved. Even after nearly 200 years of thermodynamics, why is the probability 0? Is it 0 because the laws of physics forbid it? Or is it 0 because of boundary conditions? Because the universe started in a low entropy state and that choice was never remade. Is the arrow of time a fundamental law, or is it just the consequence of a particular cosmic accident at the beginning? This matters. This distinction matters in a way that sounds philosophical, but is actually deeply physical. If time's arrow is a law, then reverse time is genuinely impossible. The universe couldn't do it even in principle. But if time's arrow is a consequence of initial conditions, then theoretically, in some other universe with different starting conditions, time could flow backward. It could flow sideways. It could have no arrow at all. And we'd never know, because in a universe with no arrow of time, there would be no causality, no memory, no way for anything to be different from anything else. But the possibility would exist. The universe we live in doesn't have that possibility, not because the laws forbid it, but because of what happened in the first moment of the Big Bang. The universe started in a state of extreme low entropy. Why? Nobody knows. Maybe it's a boundary condition of existence. Maybe it's because of quantum mechanics. Maybe it's because something we don't understand yet requires it. But that single choice, that one configuration of extremely low entropy at the very beginning, that choice is what gives time its arrow. That choice is what makes cause precede effect. That choice is what makes a broken cup stay broken. That choice is what makes your neurons unable to unexperience what they've already experienced. And here's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough. That initial choice might have been reversed. In another quantum branch, in another branch of the wave function, time might flow the other direction. There might be a universe where entropy is decreasing, where broken cups are reassembling, where every moment is an unbecoming instead of a becoming. From inside that universe, our universe would seem impossible. They would ask, what happens if entropy decreases? What happens if time reverses? And the answer from inside their universe would be nothing. The arrow would push it back. The probability would be 0. So I am back where I started, more or less. That question about time reversing for 1 second, the one that seemed like it should have a simple answer. I understand it better now in the ways that can be made precise. The mechanisms, the probability mathematics, the relationship between entropy and information, all of that is clear. But I understand it less in the ways that cannot be made precise. The question of why the universe chose its initial conditions. The question of why time has a direction at all. The question of whether that direction is a law or just a story the universe is telling itself about itself. What I've learned is that the arrow of time is not written into the fundamental equations. It's written into the boundary conditions. And we don't know why those boundary conditions are what they are. We just know that they are in everything that has ever happened. Every moment of your life, every thought you've had, every broken cup, and every heartbeat, all of it is downstream of that original choice. All of it is riding the slope of entropy, carried forward by probability, unable to reverse because the universe has no way to unknow what it already knows. 1 second of reverse time would look like nothing, and it would unravel immediately back into forward time because the universe works on statistics. And statistics always favors this order over order. Always, without exception, for all time, which is maybe what time actually is. Not a dimension, not a direction. Just a very, very strong preference for how things fall apart rather than how they come together. The universe doesn't move forward in time. The universe spends every moment becoming more likely to have become what it is. And that process of becoming more likely is what we call time. I think that is probably the honest place to stop for now.